Growing up, I usually didn't have the cash on hand to buy the manga I wanted, and while the internet at this point existed, my small child brain didn't quite know how to access that elusive, infinite inventory of scans to read. Instead, I often found myself going to my local library's small but passionate section of Japanese manga. There, I would often find myself finding random volumes of random series. This was how I would come to read Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, Bleach, and a whole other wide variety of series by jumping from volume to volume until enough of the puzzle pieces were discovered. It is also in this kind of setting that I first came across Rurouni Kenshin. Picking up the book for the first time, there were some elements that I could have gleaned by looking at the cover. Obviously, this was the story of this orange-haired Scarface swordsman, probably set in some kind of Japanese world due to the close tie to his katana, as well as the very Japanese-sounding name, especially when many other series at the time had some kind of English name, even though that name may not be the most coherent or related to the story, such as Bleach. In an era where a feudal Japan setting, the concept of ghosts from the past, female co-stars, and hidden geniuses were all fresh enough concepts to a young reader like myself, Rurouni Kenshin provided an intriguing plot, likable characters, and strong action moments that captured my attention. Later on, I would discover bootleg DVD copies of the Rurouni Kenshin anime, and after watching some parts and reading some of the others, I would come to complete Rurouni Kenshin and left with a content smile. While the purposes of this video isn't to talk about my experiences with the series, you will find that my experiences will probably mirror many of the series' initial audience. While the original run ended in 1999, it's hard to quantify the long-lasting impacts the very existence of the series has had on the manga space in ways oftentimes not visible to the naked eye. The author and artist himself, Nobuhiro, has played a vital role in guiding the future of the space itself, having had multiple assistants and mentees throughout his mangaka career, including future creator of One Piece Eiichiro Oda, future Shaman King creator Hiroyuki Takei, as well as a multitude of other lesser known but still important future creatives. Nobuhiro's invisible hands go further with this title, thanks in part to the, at the time, fresh story elements making the manga compelling and entertaining. The series would grow to be incredibly popular, especially in Japan, and as a result would inspire the country's next set of future superstars. Kishimoto of Naruto fame would cite the work as a source of inspiration and motivation to carving out his own niche. The first editor in charge of Demon Slayer would explain that the protagonist of that series, Tanjiro, initially started out without his iconic scar, and in a meeting between himself and the mangaka Koyoharu Gotoge, that he should have something that made him stand up, a la Rurouni Kenshin. The cult classic Gintamas, Hideaki Sorachi, would name Rurouni Kenshin as an inspiration for his own work, and that's just the ones that have come out publicly. Rurouni Kenshin did some things that set it itself apart from its peers, and would as a result let it leave its marks. But to understand that, it's important to examine its most recognizable peers. If we remove from the equation those series not fit for comparisons, such as sports series like Slam Dunk or mystery series like Detective Conan, both of whom were first serialized in the same year of 1994, the comparable titles at the time were often dark in nature, and most importantly, the protagonists from those series would often have a very specific outlook on human life. In contrast to that, our protagonist Kenshin would be hesitant to take the lives of his enemies, even if that is oftentimes the easy and the most straightforward solution to most problems. That isn't to say that his hands are clean, however he has a clear intent throughout most of the story to stay away from this kind of option. This kind of characteristic could be later found in his protege Oda's famed straw hat wearing hero in Monkey D. Luffy, who you would find has never gotten into a fight with the intention of murdering his opponent, even when at his angriest. Additionally, while other protagonists at the period would introduce their characters as highly skilled or powerful beings, and the story would revolve around their actions, Kenshin instead tries to downplay his abilities and often only shows off when it's necessary. Similarly, you can find this kind of quality in his other protege Hiroyuki's most famed protagonist, Yo Asakura, who admittedly does have an even more extreme laissez-faire attitude. This isn't to point out that those who once worked under him would inherit some of the choices that Nobuhiro made in character design, but rather that these qualities in a protagonist that now seem just like an option to take off were uniquely creative at the time. In fact, if we look at some of the most recognizable series of the time and compare simply the quote-unquote vibe, Rurouni Kenshin, while not necessarily a happy-go-lucky story, provides a sense of happiness and adventure, in contrast to the likes of Ghost in the Shell, Vagabond, Monster, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Hellsing, and one of the many Gundam series of choice. The story itself wrapped up in 1999 in a nice package, and even gave itself a nice little bow on top. As we've hit a new age of remakes and sequels, Rurouni Kenshin was called upon once more, and the sequel, the Hokkaido arc, was formally announced. I did like Rurouni Kenshin. It was a good series, but I will not be reading its sequel, Hokkaido arc. If you read the title and are vaguely knowledgeable in Rurouni Kenshin history, I think you can guess where we are going with the second half of this video. In November of 2017, Tokyo police entered both Watsuki's home and office and would find pornographic DVDs of underage girls. Within a few months, Watsuki would be prosecuted over possession of child pornography and would face his punishment as outlined by Japanese law. During this time, Rurouni Kenshin had a sequel series greenlit by Jump Square earlier in the year, and as a result of this news would go on hiatus. When I initially heard the news of his arrest, the headline read like a short story. The author of one of the great manga series I read as a child was found to be a pedophile with literal child pornography in his possession. This immediately left a bitter taste in my mouth, but I thought, well, that was it. That was the end of Watsuki's legacy. A few months after this, I instead heard that the gears were starting back up. The sequel to Rurouni Kenshin, the Hokkaido arc that I thought would be indefinitely suspended, was announced to be starting back up, and this left me confused. Hearing this, I thought that perhaps I had misremembered the previous news article. Could it be that the original person in question wasn't Watsuki? Perhaps I misunderstood what the crime was exactly, or maybe the case was dismissed since I originally heard about it. So I did what anyone should do in these circumstances, and I double-checked the facts available, and during this process, the more I learned, the more disgust I felt from this entire situation. Again, in November of 2017, Tokyo police would enter Watsuki's domicile and office and would find DVDs of underage girls. For those inclined to believe in conspiracy theories, you may have heard the same and tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe Nobuhiro came into the possession of some kind of unclear piece of pornography given to him from a friend and didn't even know it was child pornography. Some kind of wrong place, wrong time kind of situation. What is oftentimes not mentioned, however, is the sheer quantity of DVDs. During the search, police officers would find upwards of 100 child pornography DVDs. Maybe you then start to ask yourself if it is possible that Nobuhiro didn't know it was graphic content with minors, but Nobuhiro would once again disappoint, as he would admit to having bought these DVDs himself during police investigation, and would say, quote, and I do want to emphasize that this is a quote from Nobuhiro, "I like girls in the higher grades of elementary school to the second grade of junior high." For those of us who have been out of the education system for a while, perhaps you might not remember what exactly were the ages that make up that range, and being the most generous possible, I had looked up the Japanese education levels, and this means that he was looking for content with girls between the ages of 11 to 14 years old. Again, he was most interested in content with 11-year-old girls to the age of 14-year-old girls. This isn't a situation where some sketchy college kid tries to rationalize his high school girlfriend coming to age soon. This is a 47-year-old man purchasing 100 child pornography DVDs of girls between the ages of 11 and 14 years old. Not being Japanese myself, I am trying my best to not bring my Western sensibilities into the matter, but even by Japanese standards, I am feeling that the punishment did not exactly match the crime. At the time when the crime was committed, Japanese law regarding possession of child pornography carried a maximum sentence of 1 year and fines upwards of 1 million yen. I'm trying my best to not simply laugh at the most severe punishment. A 1-year sentence is the worst that someone found with child pornography can be subject to. Okay, well, at least Nobuhiro must have faced the full force of this law. Well, not exactly. Nobuhiro will be convicted and end up being fined 200,000 yen. Reading that number made me instantly go through the thought, what exactly is 200,000 yen? Similar to when I first saw the jackpot of Squid Game. It sounded impressive, but how much was that exactly? Looking at the conversion rate in 2018, this 200,000 yen comes to $1,750 US. Friends, the penalty that Nobuhiro was forced to face was a fine equivalent to a little bit more than my monthly rent. So I ask you, what is the real crime here? And that's if we looked at it in 2018 money. At the time of this video's release, the conversion rate has 200,000 yen, equivalent to less than $1,350, roughly a month worth of rent. Again, the maximum sentence itself is kind of laughable, with the maximum fine being equivalent to $6,745. But you're telling me that someone found with literally 100 DVDs worth of child pornography that he admitted to buying himself would even reach that maximum fine? Like, what is our metric here? Is there some kind of mathematical equation to child pornography in relationship to the fee that you would have to pay? Are we saying that there's like a cool range of child pornography DVDs that you can buy and own? And you know, Nobuhiro didn't even meet the quota of 500 DVDs, so let's give him a slap on the wrist. At this point, Nobuhiro could have considered each DVD as simply carrying an additional $13 sales fee to be an A-OK in the government's eyes. The reaction from the part of the publisher also rubbed me the wrong way. In February of 2018, when the police formally charged Nobuhiro Watsuki with these crimes, the publishing company announced that the Hokkaido Arc sequel would be put on hiatus, saying that they are taking this news seriously and that Nobuhiro feels great regret and will spend time in reflection and with remorse. So that's it. That's Nobuhiro's legacy. Or that's what I would like to say, but Japan sometimes has a magical way to disappoint. In April of 2018, Jump Square, the magazine publishing Rurouni Kenshin, released an announcement that serialization of the Hokkaido arc would start up once again, with the next chapter coming out 2 months later. And what an announcement. While I understand that sometimes nuance can be hard to translate, the wording is simply awful. Here's the announcement, and I want to break it down. This work has been on hiatus for a long time. Now, hold on, you do realize this is a sequel to a manga that ended in 1999, right? I think the time between 1999 and its sequel being started up in 2018 is what I would call a long time. The last chapter that came out in the Hokkaido arc, prior to the police literally searching Nobuhiro's home and office for child pornography, was in December of 2017, and Nobuhiro paid his fine in February of 2018. And you told me that he would actually take some time to reflect, but now you're telling me that Nobuhiro is actually so good at reflection that he is speedrunning remorse within 2 months and is now going to be okay to go in a few more months? Okay. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience and concern we have caused to our readers and related parties. This is again one of the most benign statements I've read in a long time. There are 3 things I expect in life: death, taxes, and my monthly chapter of the Hokkaido arc, of course. Nah, man, what do we mean by inconvenience, and what do you mean related parties? No, I'm sorry, officer, for making you drive all the way to my home and office to search. If you told me in advance, I would have packaged everything and sent it to the police station for you to save the trip down. Or are we talking about the at minimum 100 child victims that appeared in the DVDs? Like, well, here's to hoping that the shooting didn't go too bad and the girls were able to get home before supper. Like, what does inconvenience to related parties even mean? The author is still spending his days reflecting and repenting. In fact, you will find that Nobuhiro is actually so repentful, we are actually timing his best repenting speedrun. And you'll see that we have a countdown timer to his grand repenting finale. But we believe that it is also the responsibility of the author and the publisher to respond to the various voices received through the creation of works. So we decided to publish in July. I mean, long story short, this is just a long way of saying, we hear you, but we're doing it anyway. In short, this announcement was essentially tone deaf and was more of a declaration that we're back to business as usual than anything else. And maybe you're asking yourself that perhaps Japan is just more lenient on sex crimes in general, and maybe you're right, as the law about child pornography possession was only really established in 2015, putting it just under the preferred age of Nobuhiro at the time of this video's recording. However, in 2020, Shueisha would be faced in a similar situation, involving the writer of the Rising series Act H, Mr. Tatsuya Matsuki, who was arrested and judged guilty for committing a coerced indecent act on a female middle school student. While I'm not in the business of comparing sex crimes, the reaction from the part of the magazine Weekly Shonen Jump was very different, immediately suspending the series once the initial news hit and formally announcing that the series would be dropped later on. In fact, let's actually read this announcement together. The writer of Act Age was arrested on August 8, 2020. The editorial department takes this situation very seriously, and after confirming the matter and discussing with the artist of the series, we have come to the conclusion that it is impossible to continue with its serialization. This decision was made because of the nature of the incident, and because Weekly Shonen Jump recognizes the weight of its social responsibility. We offer our deepest regrets and apologize to our readers. This is a difficult time for the artist, but the editorial department offers her our support and encouragement for future works. Perhaps it's because, like a group presentation going badly, making the next group presentation look good, but this announcement just straight up looks better. And can we just take a moment to praise Weekly Shonen Jump for this action and announcement? But you know what really pisses me off? It's that Weekly Shonen Jump and the magazine that Rurouni Kenshin's sequel was in, Jump Square, are under the same Shueisha umbrella. We pretty much have the right arm saying that they have to think of their social responsibility, while the left arm declaring to hell with social responsibility. During this time of research, I did think that perhaps I am putting my Western outlook on life and the protection of children and trying to exert my perspective on a Japanese society that simply just operates differently. Heck, Viz, who was at the time the English publisher of the Hokkaido arc, did end up dropping the series, and to this day you cannot read any official English translation. Even on Shueisha's official online website, Manga Plus, only the original series is available, though searching for Hokkaido does bring up a fun alternative read. All this really means is that Shueisha knows that internationally, the author would be condemned, but within a controllable environment of Japan, they can keep going. My conclusion from these additional details and responses is simple. Nobuhiro is being protected from the consequences of his wrongdoing. We know that Nobuhiro and his works carry a certain level of influence within the manga world, with even the most prominent modern mangaka, One Piece's Oda, being in some ways in his debt. We know that Shueisha as a whole isn't against the idea of consequences like in the case of Act Age's writer, so it's just plain to see that Nobuhiro has simply reached this state of too big to fail. And I believe that's sad. But where does that put us, your average everyday reader? To put it simply, I will not personally be reading Rurouni Kenshin's Hokkaido arc. While I am able to go back into my memories and vaguely recall feelings of fondness for the original run, the things I've come to learn has really soured any motivation to read spin-offs and sequels. To be honest, the original manga wrapped itself nicely in a bow and remains a complete experience. I didn't need a sequel to begin with. The purpose of this video is not a call to action. I don't personally think I have the right to tell you what you can or cannot do with your life. I simply wanted to bring this to your attention so that if you are going to read, at least you have all the facts on the table. What I really wanted to do was to bring you a story of how a childhood hero can end up being a villain to children everywhere. Thanks for watching.